Because it's the launch, man.
Get it? That is true. It's pretty fitting for, I guess, for the, with the rocket ship and everything.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to thy podcast, people.
Welcome to the podcast. This is our first episode. It's kind of an introduction episode into everything that we're going to talk about, kind of the foundations of becoming an alpha, and also just kind of how we got here, specifically me. In this episode, it's kind of an introduction to me and how I came up with the idea and everything about it, just to give a little background on what the episode is going to be like, or what future episodes are going to be like.
So we're focusing on you, my friend.
Yeah.
Yes. So, all right. So the first question I wanted to ask you right off the bat, let's get personal. What are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your time? Are you going to school? Are you working?
Your sound broke out for a second. What was that?
What are you doing with your time? Are you going to school? Are you working? What's up?
So I'm actually a student at ACC right now. I'm doing general studies. I'm in the transfer program for UT. That takes up a good bit of my time.
Right.
And I'm also a CrossFit certified level 1 trainer. And I'm working on becoming a coach over at CrossFit Westlake. I'm also in NCSF certified personal trainer. And yeah, I mean, I have a good bit of hobbies. I have a good bit of things that I do. I write pretty often, just on different topics that I enjoy. I read a lot. That's a big one. I at least try to get like 30 minutes of reading a day, at least. Right now I'm reading a book called The Message of the Sphinx. I think you've heard of it, Julian, but it's about
Graham Hill.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool book. It's about kind of the mystery behind the Sphinx and how it's much, much older than was first supposed. Yes, so first it was supposed to be, like I think it was like 2,500 years old. Anyways, they found weathering on the Sphinx that would date it back to more like 10,500 BC because it hasn't rained there in about 12,000 years. So that's interesting because if Egypt is only a certain amount of years old, what came before that civilization? And then, I love mystery novels. It's it kind of accentuates the mystery and the magic of our lives and of the universe itself, because it is just one big mystery. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I do, kind of what I spend my time on.
All right, so
sorry, keep going.
No, it's good. So you wanted to start this podcast. You're kind of the big starter of this. You came up with the name. You kind of got the ball rolling. Why? What made you want to do that? Did you just want to kind of share the wonder and the mystery or whatever with everybody? What exactly motivated this?
Well, one of the key parts about it is the word alpha, and there are a lot of stigmas. There are a lot of maybe not stigmas, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with that word.
Oh yeah.
There's kind of like in nature, in animal studies, the alpha is usually a male. There are alpha females as well that kind of lead the pack, but alpha males are usually the dominant member of a group, and alpha males control the group. In fact, like in a pride of lions, or in a like a congress, or a get together of chimpanzees or something like that. They're attributed as the alpha male. So in society, that also has a role to play as well, because people often say, this person is very alpha, they're a leader, they're this, they're that. And a lot of people put a negative connotation to what is an alpha male, because they feel as though they are a dominator, or someone who seeks power and control over people. And sometimes that is the case, but sometimes, and in my opinion, what a true alpha is someone who empowers the leadership qualities of themselves, if they are an alpha, into other people, so that we have yeah, so that we have a group of alphas instead of one, probably overly confident, in the sense of a lion's pride. It's an animal. And
It sounds
usually,
like that's a little more efficient to have multiple alphas rather than just one to take on the responsibility of, leading and keeping track of things.
yeah, exactly. And that's where kind of my definition of alpha comes into play. And it has many different dimensions about it. So an alpha is someone who is the leader of their own life, their own lifestyle, the choices that they make, the decisions that they make. But it's also someone who is, in a sense, connected to what is called the alpha brainwave. That's a big one, the alpha wave, which is something that's emitted by your brain in certain states of consciousness, especially, people call it the flow. That's one of them, the flow state. When you're on a roll or you're on a flow, that's a big one, because that is the flow state. The alpha brain wave state that you're in is focused, you're calm, you don't have anxiety. Oftentimes it's associated with like creativity, which is a big one. When people say they're on,
sounds meditative.
yeah, exactly. So like poets or comedians, stand-up comedians, or fighters in martial arts, they'll say they get to a place where it's almost pristinely, like their brain is working at optimal capacity. And in this alpha state of consciousness, that's most of where these qualities come from, is that you're focused, you're creative, you're determined. And this alpha brainwave state is not unique to any individual. It's not like that guy over there has it, but I don't have it because, of some confluence in my life.
So it's not like a special superpower that only the special among us have. We all have that potential.
Yeah, exactly. So every person on Earth, unless there is something physically wrong with them, can access that kind of alpha frequency of potential. So it's more like a potential. It's more like a potentiating vibration that actually is emitted from your body, and it is definitely mitigated. So there are situations where this happens, and there are certain variables that make it more likely to happen. Like, let's say if you meditate before an interview, or there's almost an infinite number of ways that you could bring it about. For some people, or at least it used to be for me this way, is now I can just kind of tap into it. But it used to be that I come about randomly and I didn't really have control over it. One way to do it actually is to actually listen to alpha brainwaves, which you can do on, I wouldn't go to YouTube. There are companies you can actually go to that supply alpha brainwave, essentially sound bites, and you can use them. And I mean, you can use them in the same way that your brain or your body or your brain would emit it, and it actually has some really good results. And I've listened to the ones on YouTube, and they definitely help you out. But that's kind of another layer in this. It kind of comes from the alpha state, which is not. It's not something that's limited to male or female or any other gender. It's not limited to or specific to anyone. It's actually an innate human quality that we can get to. It's almost like a level of consciousness that everyone has access to. And
that sounds beautiful. Yes.
yeah, and another thing about the kind of alpha thing is being your alpha self, which means being the best version of yourself that you can be, and that has a lot of baggage on it as well, because no one can really tell you what the best version of yourself is, because that's their perception of you, and then they have all the filters that they see you through. So the only person that can really figure it out is yourself. And
Right.
everyone around you, if you get on the path to that, everyone around you becomes a guide in a sense. And even if it doesn't seem like they don't have things to teach you or to tell you or give insight into, it is there for you once you accept that. And once you accept that everyone is around you, really in the most basic of ways, helping you facilitate that version of yourself. Even if it's someone that doesn't seem like they're helping you, they're actually hurting you.
Enemies.
Yeah, an enemy. So an enemy, and that this goes into also the dark energy, but the enemy is a great facilitator of growth if you let it be that way. If you give in and become the victim of a situation or a kind of mentality, then the enemy is only ever the enemy and not essentially not your challenge. So if you see enemies and obstacles from now on, some people see them as challenges to get over or to pass through or get around. And some people look up and say, well, that's too fucking high. I can't do that. Or I'm just not good enough, or I'm this, or I'm that, or, oh, that guy's just mean, or blah, 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 blah. And, the excuses could run on forever. But basically, a big part of being an alpha is actually assessing your whole entire life and the environment in your life differently than how you would normally assess it. So it's really how you perceive things is directly relates to well, first of all, how you think about things is probably the first step to perceiving them a certain way. So if you perceive obstacles and you perceive challenges as healthy and good for you and necessary to your growth as a human being and necessary to create the best version of yourself that you could possibly be, then you get on that alpha frequency. You get on that
And that's what you
alpha
want.
path. Yeah, that's what I want for everyone, because my vision of the future is people, I've told you this before, is people transcending the masters, is
Right.
people transcending the kind of the kind of dominance paradigm, or the victim paradigm, that you have to be a victim to your life circumstances. And that, that's always a big part of how people stylize victimhood. We take stories like Oprah Winfrey, and we stylize that, and we say, wow, this person went through one of the worst childhoods you could imagine, and look where she is now. And it's often stylized, but it's rarely ever facilitated.
What do
And
you mean by that?
well, see, she did it herself. And I'm sure she had helpers along the way, but it's rarely ever taken beyond that point. So they say, oh, look what you can do. Okay. And then now go back to thinking that you're not enough to do what it is you need to do, and to really perceive your world completely different, and perceive your position in it completely different, and perceive also how you absorb the reality that you live in. And that's directly related to the ideas and the experiences you're exposed to. So I mean, it's a very complex, I guess, idea, that everyone can get on this path, can get on this wavelength, get on this frequency, get on this rhythm or pattern.
Right.
But it is an incredibly complex issue, because each person has their own unique circumstances and their own unique experiences. And what we are is a focal point of experience that's expressing itself through the physical stuff that we have on us. So we're an expression of our experience, and our experience is limited to our circumstances and our situations, and also what people have said to us, and also what people have what people have seen in us, and then brought to light, when we're in those vulnerable places, and people can pick things out and show them to us. And a lot of people are not aware that they are the victim either. So there's room for being the victim, and then there's room for becoming empowered afterwards. So being a victim is kind of necessary. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but that's just how I talk. But
go. Just keep going.
Being a victim is absolutely necessary to a tragic situation, or a situation that could have gone better. But the foundational part of being empowered is embracing that part where you feel like shit and you feel like the victim, and embracing it and being like, yeah, I don't feel that great right now. I don't like it, and no one else seems to like it either. What can we...
People seem to love that type of story, like the underdog story. You're a victim for a while, you get abused, you get broken, and then you rise above that. I think people love that. It's in movies, it's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it's stylized so much. So many of these things that we rarely ever embrace, and kind of that we actually integrate into our lives as ideas, rarely is it ever actually acted upon, because we are not comfortable doing it.
Wait, is what acted upon? What do you mean by that?
Rarely is it ever acted upon. So there is that place where you're the victim, and you're the victim of the rhythm of your life, the pattern of your life, the kind of circumstances that you've been prescribed, from childhood up until what we perceive as adulthood. And
right.
What we rarely act upon is that moment, that kind of moment of almost an infinite potentiation for change is actually right there, because in that moment you have the most room to progress, because at your lowest point you can really only go up from there. I mean, if we got into semantics, yeah, some more horrible stuff could happen to you, but when we're talking about these kind of single points throughout it, where you were the victim to a situation, or something didn't happen properly, you can only go up from there.
You're talking about rock bottom.
Yeah, in a sense, yes. But you feel like rock bottom for sure. It's definitely not, because it can always get worse. But you perceive it in a certain way. The way you perceive that moment dictates the rest of it. And that can only come about through experiencing and embracing the crap, or the crappy parts of our lives that really define who we are. You know, there are several quotes like, "What are you doing when no one's watching?" That, you know, that's a big one. We have privacy for the time being, but what are you doing when no one's watching? It might come to light someday. You never know. But what are you doing when no one's watching? What are you doing at your lowest low? You know, what are you doing at your lowest point? I remember Michael Jordan played, I'm not sure if it was a championship game or not, but he had the flu, like real bad, and he still played and did better than everyone else. So, you know, you can be at this low point, and the way you perceive it, and how much you're looking towards your goals and envisioning that, the more that you do that, and also the more you perceive about it being not necessarily positive, but about making more of the situation, then you can take yourself from that place, that victim place, and you can take it and become empowered. And that is a defining principle of being an alpha human being, is taking your shitty points and making something real great about it, making something really good.
It sounds kind of like, you know what The Secret is, right?
The Secret?
Yeah, the law of attraction or whatever. You know, it's about positive thinking and all that good stuff. It sounds kind of like you're talking about that a little bit, because you said the word perceive. It's how you perceive, you know?
Yeah, so the law of attraction plays into this a lot, and I'm sure we can get into it. But the law of attraction kind of goes like how you attract what you emit, in a sense. It's kind of like karma, you know, karma, or each reaction has an equal and opposite reaction, and it's kind of the causality of nature and reality, to be honest. If you're talking about the law of attraction, you are this kind of gravitational point. I know it sounds kind of weird, but you know, if you look at a cell, there are all these things gravitating towards it, and so many things get on you and in you, and you know, you're just this point of you're this point where everything is kind of like gravitated towards you. You almost have your own gravity, in a sense. It could be like,
I feel that. That makes sense. It's not weird.
Yeah. It's a part of the kind of the electromagnetic space, in a sense. It's kind of like a planet, and how things are gravitated towards it. You know, how life is gravitated towards it. How all sorts of things are gravitated towards it, because it's kind of like this. It's kind of like this super point almost. You're kind of like a magnet for life and everything like that. You're also a magnet for energies, and a magnet for things that you emit. So if you emit something, it kind of is like a magnet, because you're attracted to, you know, different things like that. And
it's making me think of frequencies. You know, if you're at a certain frequency, you'll be a match to certain experiences. So if you're at this particular frequency, you'll get this particular experience, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a cool video on YouTube, and it gets this pretty well. Oprah Winfrey, it's, you know, Jim Carrey and a bunch of other people. And it talks about the law of attraction. And you know, there's a billion books on the law of attraction and how to get money real fast, how to do all these things. And yeah, if you have a better energy and you have, you know, you're more on point and you're more direct and you're more experienced with your vision, yeah, you'll get more money naturally. It's not, you know, it's not a cure all for your problems, but the law of attraction is certainly real. And Jim Carrey goes into it, and he says, he talks about his first movie deal and how, like a year or something before he got his first movie deal, he wrote himself a check for $2 million. I think it was it was it 10 million?
It was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot of millions. And he wrote it to himself, and he said, I'm going to get this by next year or whenever it was. He wrote himself a check for, I forgot what it might have been a holiday. But anyways, literally on that day that he wrote the check for, on that day, what was it? It was like between 1 and 5 years. He literally signed his movie deal for exactly the same amount. He said, I'm going to make this much on this day. And when now this could be like a crazy coincidence, like winning the lottery, but I don't see it that way. I see it as someone putting their energy out, and how, whether or not it was specific enough to be responded to, I'm not sure, because, you know, I don't know enough about it. But if you ask, I don't want to put it like, if you ask the universe, like, universe, give me $2 million in 1 year, you know, it's going to happen. But when you create those kinds of goals in your mind, and you almost manifest them in external means, like a check or like something like that, it becomes a part of you in a sense. When you say that and you go after something, there's probably no reason to say you won't get it. And that's the thing as well. The circumstances for him were extraordinary, because that is extraordinary. It's wonderful. And, you know, everyone who's ever been a professional or an alpha at anything, a really amazing person, has always envisioned it first.
Yeah, it's not, and it's also with the Jim Carrey thing, it's not like he just, you know, asked for it. Like you were saying, ask the universe for something and then you're given it. He didn't just ask for it and then sit around. You know, he went and did stuff. He was, you know, he worked at his craft. He did what he needed to do. You know, he took the steps that he needed to take. He didn't just, you know, all right, I made the intention to be successful. All right, do the work for me, universe. You know, that's, and a lot of people think that's how the law of attraction works, and it's not.
It's definitely not. If you sit on your ass, nothing will get done. Maybe
I've noticed that.
It happens to everyone. But I mean, if you create a ideal, or, I mean, there's so many things that have been created. It's ridiculous. I mean, someone at some point had to invent the flying spaghetti monster, and it was enough of an idea that they could create it, and now it has followers. Like, if someone can create that stupid of a belief system, then everyone can do any of the things that they want to do as a dream. If a college student can make the flying spaghetti monster religion, and everyone he gathers followers who are serious, and he even admits that it was an experiment. It was a project, basically a social experiment. He wasn't even serious about it, and people still follow it, still have a connection to it. So if you can create an ideal or an idea system that people can have connection to, you will get people's attention. So attention also has to do with attraction. And I mean, that's a big component of attraction, is attention, getting people's attention as well in the right way. Or, I mean, I'm not sure if there's a right way, but in a way that is attractive. So if you're, that's how people in business do it. They'll go, what target audience do you want? Because
Right.
that gets the most people to your thing, to your product, to your idea, to your business, whatever. And part of it is attention, and what kind of attention you get. I don't want to get into politics or anything, because I'm kind of partial to it, but the way that Trump got his attention for the election, whether you say it was positive or negative, a lot of the negative attention fuels in the election.
Oh yeah.
Fueled his success among people, because, and that's a thing. And honestly, I I wouldn't want to get into having a person on, but the thing of thrive in that shock value. Like I was telling you about Eric Andre the other day, that comedian that just is pretty darn successful, and he doesn't believe in anything, and people like him. And you don't have to be anything specific, and you certainly don't have to adhere to any guidelines, unless, I mean, I would, it's kind of like when you go to the Grand Canyon and they're like, hey, don't go close to the edge. It's kind of like, there are some things you need to take into consideration, but there aren't any strict rules to how to create your ideas and how to become creative and how to do all these things. It's not written in stone. There's no 10 commandments of, being an alpha or being the best version of yourself. It all has to do with how you interface with reality. And
that's unique for everybody.
Yeah, that's unique for every person. And the way you interface with reality directly relates to how your life goes. And that's a kind of system that people are locked into almost their whole lives, and they aren't perceptive of it or cognizant of it, and they kind of go into this, it's almost like a washing machine where they just kind of like go around and around and around, and they don't know that there's a door and they can get out and walk around and be like, oh, I'm free from that. I don't have to perceive the world this way anymore. It's kind of like you're enslaved to your own unconscious, to your own kind of to your own patterns of behavior and your own patterns of perception. And that's a big one, is that we need to break free of that. We need to break free of the patterns that of our perceptions. Now, some of them are good and need to be elaborated. Some of them are awesome. Sometimes we have awesome behaviors, but sometimes we have behaviors that we just do unconsciously. I mean, like a good, like one that's a good one is going to the bathroom. Like that's good behavior. Like going to the bathroom. But another behavior could be, it could be anything. It goes on forever. If something's affecting your life in a certain way, you have to assess it and be like, how is this helping me? Or how, what is, what's the collateral damage?
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I was still talking.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So look for the ones that are serving you. So you're not being served. So you're not serving your own mind. That's wonderful and amazing, but that can enslave us to just stupid behaviors. And I've had to deconstruct a whole library of behaviors that I've had that are ridiculous. There's no reason. I mean, there is a reason I had them, because I had to go back and see, whoa, why was I doing this? Why am I doing this now? And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, so I kind of understand. Now I need to create new patterns of behavior. And everyone's like, 21 days to break a habit, all that stuff. And that's good. That's good and dandy, but there's a lot that goes into those 21 days or those, and for some people it's different. Some people can quit things cold turkey or do things out of the blue, and some people can't. Some people need 40 days, to be honest, because there's some real deep stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. Like I need a long time to integrate as well. And it's also the way you integrate these new patterns of behavior, because you can't just start doing something. That's not how it works. Any change in your body's default mode is going to elicit a lot of friction and a lot of your body being like, why are you doing things differently?
Oh
Like
yeah.
I thought we were cool. Like I don't know why you're all of a sudden behaving differently or trying this new thing. Like, what are you talking about? We're fine. We're doing okay. And that's kind of the ego trying to steer you in that way.
If you've done a pattern or whatever, if you're in a pattern for like 5 years, that's gonna make the shock very powerful.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and that's the point, is that there's more of it in your body. So imagine if there's your behavior right here, and then you just start layering on top of it. So every time you do it, it's another layer inside of this. And just imagine and imagine like a muscle almost, or like a mass in your brain or like in your body that's kind of been built upon and built upon and built upon. Well, once you just ignore it and stop, and do it a different way, that is going to be kind of like vibrating. It's going to be like, whoa, what is happening? And your brain and your body is just going to be like, what are you doing? And it's going to come up with every reason for you not to do it, because, hey, we have this pile of stuff over here already. Why do we need to make new stuff? Like, why don't we just keep it and not do anything new? Because your ego, and which is the master of your I guess your pattern or your behavior structures, is definitely going to battle you on this. Your ego is going to tell you in any uncomfortable situation that you shouldn't be there. You don't want to be there. Don't be there. Go somewhere else. Do something else. Don't do those things that you need to do that would probably be best.
That's those demons. Demons talking.
It's those demons, man. And they exist. And see, the thing about it is there's no negative connotation to demons, in my opinion. There's no negative connotation to something that is there as like a challenge, like in a video game. Okay. And every one of those people is evil in the video game. But each time you progress a level, so you get level 2, level 3, and each time you fight a boss, you get better at the game. And that's exactly how life is. Every time you're confronted with a situation, it's a game. There's nothing else that you can perceive it as. It's a game. You go,
those
okay.
Negative things are symptoms,
Yeah.
There's a use to them.
Yeah, exactly. So they are, what they really are is facilitators. So what they are is facilitators of growth or decay. So you can either perceive them as being a challenge, or you can perceive them as being your demise. So you can perceive demons as being evil, these kind of technically evil parts of yourself, or you can see them as challenges and see them as almost as not a rival, but as a competitor, or a kind of like a rival, kind of like losing the word. Anyways, like a rival. So treat them as that, and then it becomes a game. Then it's like, okay, so I lost this time. How am I gonna beat the shit out of that guy next time? How am I gonna take his face and slam it into the ground next time? Not literally, of course. I'm talking about the demon, all these behavior systems.
Those demons kind of highlight what game you should be playing, where you should be working on yourself. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I got this type of demon. Well, let's go into that,
Yeah. And it's kind of like when you start addressing these things like that, and you start addressing life as a game and life as these little challenges and tasks. And it's funny that more people don't get that, because that's what a game is. Life is a game, and they even have the game life. Literally, it's a game. It's like we got a point system over here, which is money. In a sense, there are points that you get, and then there's experience that comes with getting all these points, which is currency or money. And you get experience points in different things for doing different things. Okay. And then you level up whenever you accomplish things, whenever you go on a quest, whenever you go on a task, whenever you do anything in the game, whenever you beat up someone a certain amount of time. I'm not saying anyone should go out and start beating people up, but I'm saying that when you're faced with your own darkness and you're faced with your own demons, you should, but when you're faced with your own demons, be knowing that those are literally skins that you have to shed in order to become better. So the process of shedding the skin of, in a sense, rebirth, a part of you has to die, and for a new behavior to take its place. It's a perfect metaphor of the phoenix rising. The phoenix is probably one of the most eternal, ideals of all time. It's the true phoenix rising. It's the true life, death, rebirth motif.
It's an archetype.
It's an archetype, and it is written in our genes. It is written in our unconscious. And when we do this, and when we try and change ourselves to become better people, or not, and better is also a word with a lot of baggage. Whatever you perceive as better, that essentially that phoenix rising moment happens, where a part of you has to die. And imagine it if you were, choking something out. Imagine it, choking one of your demons out. It's going to fight you. It's going to fight you a lot. And because it wants to be around. It's a part of you that wants to fight it out and wants to be around, because you've done so much with it, that so much baggage is in there, so much stuff. It's really hard to change parts of yourself because of that. And I'm not saying I'm a psychologist or psychiatrist or anything. I'm all those things. As being human, I believe we are all able to access those kinds of archetypes. And I think essentially all subjects, are archetypes and can be understood. But that is the true phoenix rising. So it's the true archetype of evolution and change in the universe. And that's why it's such a powerful symbol in alchemy, and such a powerful symbol in Hermeticism and magic, is because it is truly magic. It is that magic thing that enables change to happen in the universe. But you have to understand it, and you have to realize a part of you, if you want to change a lot, many parts of you have to die. You have to choke out
the
100.
The victim must die so that the master may live.
Yeah. That little victim, like golem creature that lives inside of you. I know it lives inside of me, that's for sure. That shitty little ego creature inside of me that is uncomfortable in every situation and anxious and fucking kind of very weak. There's certainly a weak part of me, and I think there's a weak part of everyone. And the more we do battle with it, the more we fight it, the more we choke out demons, and the more we address ourselves this way, is the more we make room for this rising, this phoenix rising, or this alpha rising, to where to where we get to a point where we address those situations and we say, okay, is this situation going to beat me, or am I going to be on top? Now, that doesn't mean, I'm not saying, if someone comes to fight you, that you need to beat them up or something like that. This is simply metaphorical, that are you going to let your life beat you, or are you going to beat life? I mean, it's one of the simplest things, but it's one of the hardest things to do. Are you going to let situations beat you, or are you going to beat life? And also, this goes into another thing I like to get into, is that failure, or at least permanent failure, doesn't exist. Whenever I say, are you going to let life beat you? That's a perception of beating, of failure.
You're not defeated unless you accept defeat.
Yes. Or you die. That's a big one.
Or that,
We don't know what happens afterwards. There could be a lot of things. Maybe you get another chance. I don't know. But while we're living, there's some stuff that goes on. So this is one of them. Failure, and you'll see a lot of motivational videos, and we can go into motivational videos for a while, and why I don't like them anymore. They feel real nice whenever you watch them, but they don't do much for you.
But I mean, this talk right now, it's kind of motivational. It's pretty motivational,
yeah,
I'd say.
It's kind of motivational, but it's kind of tied at both ends, or at least I'm going to try to. That's like gets you pumped for working out, that gets you pumped up for something, pumped up for this, pumped up for that. But there's no in between integration and elaboration.
You just
it kind of says you can do whatever you want. You have the most potential in the world, and then it just shuts off. It shows a bunch of people that have done it, and it's like, yeah, you can go do all these things, blah 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 blah. Here's all these people that have done it. Now, what are you gonna do?
You're kind of talking about just grounding that.
Yeah. So bringing it in and letting you know what it actually takes. So all those motivational videos are okay. They kind of potentiated some things for me. Like they might have been necessary in me figuring out I don't need them. But the motivational videos, they're great, and they're wonderful, and they feel great. But I mean, you've seen that Charlie Chaplin speech, like 15 times probably? I mean, I know I've seen it like 20 times.
It's awesome. It's great.
It's wonderful and great, but what the fuck has it done for you? Like that's the thing.
It made me feel good in the moment. That's pretty much all I did.
Yeah. And then what? You go back to your life. You go back to your patterns. Exactly. You go back to your behaviors. You go back to all the things that you're chained to like a slave. And what people need to do is break those chains and be like, I don't need your motivational videos anymore. I don't need this crap. I am envisioning for myself my future, and I'm getting there, and I don't care what it takes. That's what it takes, is really addressing yourself and really becoming aware of yourself and aware of your person, and not giving in to all this fluffy, stupid stuff that's around. It's all fluffy. It's so nice and pretty looking. All those videos, they don't show any of them without music. Shit. If you just put that music on for me, I would get pumped. I would be like, yeah, let's do something. Like so Lord of the Rings music. It would be better. So pretty.
It would be better to watch a video that tells you or shows you steps on how to break patterns.
And I'm not saying those don't exist. And I'm not saying that motivational videos don't exist where they do that. I'm saying that I've seen a lot of them. I used to watch them just to go work out. I used to think that it was healthy to watch them every time before I worked out. A lot of people watch them to get their pump, to get their motivation, to get this, to get that. No, there's a video I made in the channel. It's motivation is bullshit. You have to be hungry. You have to want it. You can't get your motivation from a video.
It's icing. It's icing on the cake, decoration.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm not saying that those videos don't have any worth. I'm saying they don't do anything for you. They might lead you to an idea, but they don't tell you how to address that idea. Just waking up early in the morning, earlier than you do, is not mentioned in that. Just waking up early and what it takes to wake up early is not mentioned. It's a bunch of people who do wake up early and are crazy. That's what a lot of them are. They're like, I wake up at 3 a.m. every morning, and I take a walk down the street and I talk to God. That all has to do with that person's experience. Okay, but if you don't have that experience that guy has, his little program thing might not jive with you at all. Maybe it does, but you're that exception. Okay, there's an exception to the rule that some people are, who can quit cold turkey and can just up and quit things or up and start things. And there's an exception to that rule. And then there's everyone else who actually has to really, 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 really dig deep into themselves to wake up early in the morning.
Do the work.
Yeah, I mean, just try waking up an hour earlier. I mean, unless you already do, but try waking up an hour earlier. Let's say if you have trouble sleeping in, just try and wake up an hour earlier and see how much friction comes up whenever you try that one time. You could wake up out of bed. You don't even get out of bed yet. And your ego is like, why are you getting up? Why don't you just sleep for like 30 more minutes? Come on, man. Like, why don't, why do you have to get up? All these questions in your mind come up. For most people, maybe you're the exception and you're perfect and you get out of bed and your clothes are already on and you just run out the door. But there's a lot there. I'm just saying there's more than what motivational videos tell you for the most part. There's more out there. Okay. There's more that goes into it than being pumped. Okay. And waking up early and grinding away. That's a big one. Get on your grind. Grinding is necessary. Grinding is a necessary thing. There's also not grinding. There's also literally having to address all these kinds of behaviors in your life and having to do them by yourself. And it's totally possible. But they don't really tell you that. And it's all with Lord of the Rings music and giant ripped dudes doing like workouts and shit. And it's like, come on, those aren't real people. Those aren't the people who need the help. If you showed some weak ass kid, okay, and you were like, you know what this kid goes through whenever he goes to work out? He has to fight every fiber of his being to work out. He has to do mantras, like no pain, no gain, or like, all sorts of things. He has to do all these things. And there's no music. This would be true. There ain't no music whenever you're by yourself, whenever you're with yourself. There's no epic music. There's no epic music. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, like when you're by yourself, that music shuts off. You go back to your life after you watch some motivation. There's no epic music around you. You don't have a theme song to your life unless you're a crazy rich person and you're weird. You don't have a theme song. You don't have some coach screaming in your ear, "Hey, now would be a good time to write down your goals for today. Now would be a good time to do this, and that."
You gotta have an internal coach.
Yeah, so you have to address yourself, and you have to readdress all the parts of your life and perceive reality completely different, as a game that we're going through, as something where you can take challenges head on, or you can essentially not take them at all and just kind of go through the motions. And that's okay. But if you want change and you want that, if you want to be the best version of yourself, that's not okay. You can't do that. And for those people who want to be alpha, you gotta wake up one day and say, okay. And trust me, I'm not an alpha person. I'm not the person to talk about this. I am, however, on the path of doing that. And everyone is on the path. No one gets to this best thing. It's always something we're striving and struggling for in the future, but it's never fully achieved. It's never solidified completely. We might be complacent, but we can never be the best version of ourselves. We can always be striving for it and always be struggling for it, but we're human. We have to recognize our animal side. We're not all intellectual. We also have to feel, and we have to not grind, not grind 18 hours a day. Sometimes we have to sit there and do nothing for a while.
Rest and digest, baby.
Yeah, go out in nature or something. A lot of these videos are like, if you want to be successful, you need to work 100 hours a day. And it's like, yeah, some people can't do that. Some people don't have the capacity to stress themselves that much. And it is very stressful, especially biologically, because your body needs a certain amount of rest. Yeah, you can be a diehard and get 3 hours of sleep one night, but everyone else is going to have a lot of trouble. Biologically speaking, it's way too stressful. You got to have that good balance. You got to have that, that fight or flight, grinding every day. And then you have to have that rest and digest. Get your rest, do some things that, I don't want to say like yoga or meditation, but do something that de-stresses you. There's no rules. Do something that de-stresses you, and that balances it out. If you grind for 18 hours, that other 4 hours, or that other, what is it, 18? Yeah, so that other 6 hours better be either sleeping or that combined with something very soothing, because your body, your nervous system is not set up to do that. It's not really. You have a parasympathetic nervous system and a sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is your fight or flight. It's that grinding, it's that focus, that adrenaline, the adrenals, the adrenal glands. The parasympathetic is that rest and digest. Get your rest. If one of those is off kilt, you're gonna have some problems on your hands.
It kind of makes me think of the gym. If your ego wants you to work those 100 hours, and because that's what a successful person does, and you just force yourself through it, you're going to hurt yourself. But going to the gym, thinking of it in terms of weights, when I first kind of started going to the gym, I was a little self-conscious because there's a bunch of people around me that have already been doing it, working at it, and they can lift double the weight that I can do. So it's like, you just want to jump right up to the higher weights, but you can't do that. You're going to hurt yourself. You got to, be humble, realize that you're just starting out, and pick up that 5-pound weight.
Yeah.
Don't be ashamed. Fucking, so pardon my language, do some curls, with those 5-pounders. It doesn't matter. You're starting. That's the important thing.
It's okay if you cuss. That's fine.
It is. There's adults here. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. I really don't want to. I don't want to create that space where we have to be super.
We're not incredibly vulgar, anyways. So
yeah, we're not the most vulgar people. Sometimes we are, but. But yeah, the thing about it is that a big thing about working out, especially if you're scrawny or you're fat, because I was once obese. I was once almost 300 pounds. I was 295 pounds at my heaviest. So you have to get over the fact that there are people looking at you. That's a big one. You have to move past what people perceive of you. So if you pay attention more to what other people think of you rather than what you think of yourself and what you do with yourself, you will always be at the mercy of others and not your own growth, not your own potentiation and evolution and change. You cannot be accepted by everyone. You might not even be accepted by a few people, and that's fine. If you're doing weird, crazy stuff in the gym, or you're lifting with 5 pounds, and you see that guy just flexing it up and just being an ego hog, then you take that and you say, maybe you want to look like that guy. You say, I want to be that muscly sometime. Maybe he's flexing and he's acting all macho, but maybe if you actually went up and talked to him, he might be able to give you some pointers. Everyone at the gym isn't judging you. They're all there, and they're all probably thinking the same thing, and they're all trying to compensate for it.
Right.
Well, I'm here and I'm lifting some weights, so I might as well think about how I look while I do it. And it says that they're just a bunch of people in there, just almost the same as you, except with different experience that they're expressing from. But go in there and think about it. Really embrace that moment when you realize, wow, everyone's watching and I'm a scrawny little bitch. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, that's how you perceive yourself. If you perceive yourself as scrawny and little and weak, then embrace that. Go in there. You surround yourself with those huge dudes. Surround yourself. They should be all over the place. You should be working out next to them and flexing or trying to.
And anyone that's like laughing at a super skinny, scrawny person, or putting them down, or the same goes with an obese person. They're laughing at them for being in the gym, or like putting them down, or looking at them, staring at them weird, judging them. That's really weird to me. That's a little imbalanced, because it's like they're in the gym. They're trying to make a change. Shouldn't you be like applauding them, if anything?
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, is I've never ever seen that, and I hope I don't, because I would probably yell at them. I mean, but that's also a thing. Bullies, evil people, again, they're the potentiators. So yeah, it's not cool that guy makes fun of him, but that's that extra challenge. That's that extra challenge. Now it sucks, and I'm not saying that it's okay for that guy to do that, or that woman to be like, look at that ass, like it's so small. Like, what are you doing here? Like you shouldn't be here lifting weights. But that could be another challenge. So
little extra fire.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is that you have demons, but they're limited. Now, other people's demons, they catch you off guard. So if you're in there, you're already thinking about everyone's judgments, blah, blah, blah. And someone comes up and they're like, God, you're so scrawny, man. Like, what do you take like a post-workout or something? Like, come on. Or, they're like, dude, look at this guy over here. He's so small. And everyone laughs at you. That's that extra moment to be that much better of a person. Not like turn the other cheek. You can flick them off, or you can, do whatever you need to back. But just know that kind of thing can be another potentiator. Because when I was obese, there were plenty of people who made fun of me. And I had before, after that, I had also bullied some people too. And I got to see how it felt like. And it was kind of like me compensating for that. And I feel like if someone makes fun of someone else because they're small, it's because maybe they were treated that way as well. And they're just working on that pattern, their behavior. And they're doing it. And maybe it's unconscious, or maybe it's like, they haven't been confronted about it to perceive it differently. But that that's a big thing for people in the gym. That's a big thing that you have to get used to. You have to get used to people looking at you and looking kind of ridiculous, because gyms are kind of ridiculous. They're compensating, and not all gyms are ridiculous. I'm just saying they're a symptom of our inactivity, and we go into a gym to move our bodies and lift things, and it's just funny to me. It just happens to be curious. There are a lot of people outside, on Town Lake or in other places, working out and stuff. But it's funny because we go to a place to lift things and do all of these things, and there's a purpose for it. But it's funny because we live in a society that almost demands sedentaryism. It demands you to not be that active.
Not everyone's a farmer anymore.
Yeah, that's a big one. Not everyone's a farmer anymore,
or a hunter-gatherer, or whatever.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about the little weak and scrawny guys. He can be that way, or he can have that lion inside. He can be a little cub, to everyone else, at least look like a little cub, doesn't know how to roar yet, all those things. But inside, he can be a lion. He can be an alpha, and he can take that stuff and he can turn it into his dream or her dream, depending on the person. But you can either take that and use it as fuel for yourself, or you can take it and you can let it burn up and let it boil inside of you. I know that whenever I was rather large, I was rather obese. I had people call me fat, blah blah blah. But what it did was I let it potentiate myself later on. I let it potentiate myself to become, in the best shape of my life now, be, with the most capacity now. And, a lot of the people that made fun of me are now at their lower capacities, because everyone has a high capacity, or except for the exceptions like me. But when they're young, a lot of those people have high capacities with their young, and then they burn out because that's how hormones work. And if you don't eat right and exercise when you get older, you're not going to that place. No one really close to me now has ever said those things. But the thing about it is I'm coming up, and some people are going down, and that that's not something I'm saying I'm proud about. I'm saying it's an observation, and it happens to make me feel good. It happens to make me want to be like, screw you. Like, that's, I could say, oh, that's karma, oh, that's karma getting them, but it really isn't. It's just a confluence of different situations, because I'm sure some of them are doing fine. But that's the thing, is that there's a big difference between someone who, and I'll tell you right now, the difference between that successful person, that celebrity, that business owner, that anything like that, is they perceive their life as a game, and you don't. They perceive their life and the circumstances within it as challenges. Okay, challenges to overcome, challenges to exceed, challenges to transcend from. That they perceive it a different way than you. There's really no difference. There's no difference between you and a successful person, except how they perceive challenges, and then from that perception, how they react to it. So your reaction, and you always see that meme. It's like, it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. And that's wonderful, but not the rest. The rest isn't explained. That sounds wonderful. Like, oh, really? All I have to do is react differently? No, that's like one little point on this huge spectrum of all the things that you have to do in order to get to that point. So to get to the point, there's some ground rules. There's, before reaction, there's the action. There's also processing that action, and then also processing the initial reaction, and then trying to create that reaction, trying to make it a better reaction to everything. And there's, it's that action reaction thing. And that's funny how the word reaction is reaction. So it's taking that action and rebounding it and creating a new action out of it. So action, reaction. And it's just like the law of attraction. Attracting that action. And that's a big thing, is that all these people are attracting to themselves is these obstacles, is these challenges. And they just perceive them differently than you. And that doesn't make them more morally better or anything like that. It just happens to be what they do. And there's probably a reason for every one of them, but we wouldn't be able to go over that anyways. But that's the only difference. Literally, that's it. just how they perceive challenges and problems and situations in life. They don't even have to be problems. They could be a perfect situation, and what they look for is how to make it better. And that is the thing. They see each thought, each life, each reality as an opportunity to evolve and to grow and to exceed and transcend limitations. The only difference is you see a limitation for yourself, and they see a step. You know, you see a wall and they see a stepping stone. And that's I mean, that's one of the fundamental parts of it. I mean, yeah, that's a big piece of what makes an alpha human being, is that right there.
So, I mean, that's what you want to kind of accomplish through this channel, is just kind of illuminate all these kind of subjects.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely want to illuminate them, and then get, you know, that's why we would be having these conversations, is that more comes up in a conversation than in a motivational video or a law of attraction video.
Oh, yeah.
It's more real, okay? So there's what really happens, and then there's what happens in a video someone's trying to sell you on. There's a large difference. Now, I remember you and me, we got introduced to Alan Watts quite a while ago. Most everyone else who listens to him was introduced to him a long time ago, but it was rather recent when we got introduced to him. Anyways, all his videos are wonderful and fluffy and nice, but I never understood them until I experienced, and there's still much of his thoughts and things that I've yet to completely experience. You know, one of them being that we are the universe. You know, that's, you know, all of these things. But I never understood them until I experienced it. So that's a big part of what these motivational videos are missing, is they might, some of them, fill in all the blanks and be like, this is what you got to do. But you have to experience it in order for it to have an impact on you that's lasting, that's longer than temporary. And I mean, my biggest belief in this life is direct experience. And I think it's the ultimate reality. I think it's the ultimate God, is the direct experience of life and the direct experience of all of these things in our lives. And how, if we can get down to the mechanisms that facilitate and potentiate and cultivate our experience of reality, then we can change reality for everyone if everyone does that. And it's pretty simple, but you have to experience it first, because if for anyone who doesn't know, Alan Watts is a philosopher, and he has a way with words. Definitely. He is one of the most intelligent people that has ever lived on the face of the earth. I mean, just his thing about school and programming children to think different ways. If anyone hasn't seen his take on school, you should definitely go look at it. But he has all sorts of these kind of noetic principles and noetic understandings, like these things that feel like they're filled with knowledge and filled with information. And it's the same with these motivational videos. You're like, yeah, I really believe this guy. Like he seems legit. Like it seems like there's a lot of knowledge in him. And the thing about it is that knowledge isn't in you yet. That's a big one. The knowledge that he has, he built with his own hands.
But it's a bit of a teaser.
Yeah.
Teases you.
Yeah. It's a tease. It's a I call it motivation porn.
To be honest. To put it.
Yeah, some of them aren't. Now, I'm not speaking to all of them. I'm just generalizing, and there's a big difference. I'm not saying universally. I'm saying generally. The most popular ones are pretty much motivation porn. They're pretty much they are not porn in the sense of sex, videotaped, but they are basically taking that part of you that really wants to change, and they're basically, through music, through all these intense things, they're kind of sexualizing it. They're making it sexy so that it's attractive to you. And they're really good at this. They're really good at attracting you to their ideals and ideas. But it's just porn. Just like actual pornography is not real sex. That's not real success. That's something that someone took from someone else saying. And yes, it's probably valuable information, but it's not your experience. So a big part of being an alpha is not looking to other people's experience to experience your, well, not to experience. That's because that's what we're doing here. We're taking our experience and helping other people experience. It's basically taking the experience of someone else superficially, because those things go very deep. So superficially, and then trying to integrate it into your life, because the points that they get to are pretty superficial. They don't go too deep enough. And some people do, to be honest, and it's good, but we need more of it. We need more of people like us who actually go into the deepness and go into the darkness. And some people aren't ready for the darkness. They're really not. They're not ready to face themselves and face what they are, and face their demons, and face, and I'm not saying religiously, I'm not saying a religious connotation of a demon. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a kind of what is perceived as a negative or dark entity.
Right. It's a
kind of energy.
It's a metaphor. It's an archetype.
Yeah. I don't want to give people the impression that I believe in the demons of the Old Testament or something like that. I mean, they very well could be. But sorry, my puppy is right here. And oh my gosh, the dog is playing with me. All right, guys, I have to do a podcast. Yeah. So, I mean, they very well could exist. So these demons that existed then could be the same ones now potentiating. And that's Lucy, by the way. She's pretty cute. Anyways, so basically, demons are this kind of facilitating energy. They can be this. So they can be very destructive, or they can be facilitative. So they can facilitate your evolution, your growth, all of these things. But if you perceive them as evil and you put a label on them and you say, you're just evil, I hate you, I don't want to be around you, anyone who does is against God and against the divine and against, ourselves. And that's not true at all. Once you demonize something, and once you, that's a funny word that we use, but once you seclude it and say, this is only evil, it can't give me anything, then you burn that bridge, and you break that gap. Because if you create a self inside of you, when you do that, you create a little reality inside of you where there's something that is a part of you that you perceive as evil, that you perceive as not good for you. But if you perceive it, if you perceive it as a facilitator, then you're like, okay, I see you there.
And then you want to explore it and go into it and find out what's going on.
Yeah. So you want to explore it, or you want to take what it says or it expresses, and consider it, because you don't have to accept everything. So That's a big one, is that you just consider things. You don't have to accept them or act upon them.
Consider the following.
Yes. So you a good one is that you consider things. So let's say if this demon comes up, a part of yourself that you're not really agreeing with, and it comes up. It's an adversary. That's the word. It's a great adversary, and you treat it like, okay, yeah, so I see you there, but I'm still going to keep autonomy of me, and I'm not going to just accept that, because thoughts are thoughts. A lot of times they don't have place. They don't have a basis. Sometimes they're just random. Sometimes they're just out of the blue, and yeah, it's not. You definitely want to consider everything, especially your demons, because they're not evil. Guys, hush. Go on. Shh. But yeah, I kind of lost track of my
that's all
train of
right.
thought there.
I got something for you. I'm super excited for this channel because, we're going to be raw. We're going to be real. We're just going to be our damn selves, and share our direct experience.
Yeah.
And I love that. And you're highlighting that that's much more powerful than these other kind of wishy-washy motivational type things. And this one was kind of focused around Sam, kind of him expounding his ideas, and it's going to be super fun. I don't know. I'm just super excited about this, and I'm feeling the flow. I'm feeling the alpha flow already.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's it's a big part of, at least it's a big part of my life. I mean, so a big thing to think about is, I mean, obviously perceiving your reality different, but going into what it takes to perceive your reality differently. And that's we went over that a little bit, but also, being an alpha means also being a leader sometimes. There's some people who need to follow leaders until they can become an alpha. I think that eventually what will happen is that we'll all be alphas. We'll all be transcended. We'll all be ascended masters, in a sense. We'll all be masters of whatever craft it may be. And I think it's very possible that we can all create this alpha mindset. But a big part of it is people have to get over their shit. That's a big one. People got to get over that. Or at least
the soul work.
Yeah, it's a lot of energy work. So it's facing your darkness is a big one. What was I going to say? Yes. Yeah, facing your darkness, that's a big one. But that's the thing, is that a lot of people aren't willing to do that, and a lot of people aren't ready to. That's a big one. But another thing about the experience of what your dreams are, or what behavior you want to incorporate into your life, what does it take? That's one of the questions you really need to ask, is what does it take? But also, that experience is the most important thing that you can have. It's the most important out of all of them. Knowledge is nothing without experience. Knowledge is that superficial, sexy stuff that gets peddled around on YouTube. That's a big thing that, and I'm not speaking to all religions here, but most of religion relies on you not experiencing things, specifically God, but it relies on you not experiencing it so that they can tell you what God is and what it means to them. And people wouldn't go to these places. They wouldn't go to motivational videos, kind of like church. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with church, but I believe the most in direct experience. And a lot of places, like, let's say, a religious institution, if everyone was experiencing God, and really experiencing the divine, why would they need to go to church to have someone tell them that they were?
It's a middleman.
Yeah. So if you're, and that's, I'm not shitting on religion or church. I'm just saying it's an observation. It's a thing that happens. In fact, priesthoods were created to take the experience away from individuals. That's a big one. Specifically the Catholic Church. So big one, Catholic Church, whenever during the Inquisition, they would find different tribes that have different rituals and different things like that. One of them was San Pedro, which was a ceremony that was facilitated by the Catholics in the Inquisition. And basically, they found all of these people at Chavin in South America. They found all these people experiencing the divine, guided by a shaman, experiencing the divine through this plant medicine experience. And the Catholic Church didn't like it, because they were like, we can't have all these people experiencing the divine and God and everything like that for themselves, because we want to control it. We want to control everyone's experience of what's going on. And I feel like that is at the heart of what these motivationals are trying to do. They're trying to, a good bit of them are trying to control your experience of what, of the very thing that you're trying to get motivated about. They're trying to direct your experience of how you're going to address whatever you want to be motivated towards, whether it be your goals or just working out. It's very much like that. And it's at the basis of a lot of mainstream religions, is controlling what people experience and controlling what people think. That's a big one. That's one that, man, I really want to go into, because a lot of dogmas, religions, in a sense, patterns, there's a definite geometry about it. In a sense, any pattern of thought that is organized, and then orchestrated and then disseminated, like basically forced onto people or not forced onto people, is trying to control your experience of reality instead of empowering you to have your own experience. That is the major problem with religion today, is that, there are parts of mainstream religions, like Christianity, Catholicism, all of these things, Islam is one of them, even some of the other ones that seem more peaceful, like Hinduism. There's karma, which is definitely trying to control people's experiences with the caste system and everything like that. There are also, with Islam, it's Sharia law or some of the other rules. And in Christianity, it's, the Ten Commandments, which is a big part of it. But basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to control what experience you have in this life and what experience you have of nature and of your family and of women or animals or things in general. Also emotions or behaviors. So what religion has done is tried to control the experience of people for a long time. And it's not time for religion to die, because religion is just a bunch of beliefs that are put together in, let's say, a book or anything like that, and then they're expanded upon and upheld, in a sense. What needs to die is organized religion. So what needs to and will eventually die is the organization of religion and the dissemination of what people can experience or should experience in that religion. So we're already getting to it now with, lots of different kinds of Christianity. There's quite a few. There's, uh, Protestants, there's all sorts of churches because they're all breaking apart in some kind of minute way, some kind of particular way or another. And they all claim to be the one. And that's the thing, is that they are all the one. They're all one particular offshoot, kind of addressing the real problem. They're like symptoms of the greater source of the problem, which is that no one should control what people think about reality. No group of people should control what your experience is of reality, or say that they know your experience of reality and say, you should do exactly what we say, or you don't believe in this. You don't believe in God. You're not being an alpha, if we don't say so. It would be like us being like, if you don't prescribe to our alpha definition, then you're not an alpha. You're a beta. You're you're a weakling. You don't know what you're talking about. And we couldn't go into in one lifetime how many things go into becoming an alpha, because it's individual and it's something for each person to experience. And I think that individual experience is the ultimate religion. And it really is, because everyone has a different experience of religion. Everyone has a different experience of society. Everyone has a different experiences of all the rituals and different things that we have. Direct experience, direct personal experience is the ultimate reality. Is it, at least for you, it definitely is. It's something that's super important in order to break away from people who are vampires, in a sense. People who, in order to become an alpha, you have to shed the influences of people trying to control you. So people trying to control your experience, or control what you eat, or what you say, or what you do, or what you put in your body, or you put in your brain. You have to shed yourself of that reality, that there are people out there who might look like they are alpha, might look like they are in leadership positions. Sorry, that's my pup. But really, they are vampires. And what happens whenever an institution or a person gets in a position where they have control over your experience and you surrender that to them? That's the whole process of being converted into a religion, is that you're giving up all of your experience of reality of life to this person. And what happens is that now they have control over your reality. And that's really fun to them, because they can experiment and see what all we can get you to experience. It's certainly like an experiment. They're trying to see how many things they can elicit out of you, how many things they can get you to think, and then also how you act is directly associated to that, to what you believe. So if we can get populations to think a way that we want them to, we can control them completely. And that's a big part of it, is that those aren't the only people who have that kind of harsh, or not harsh, but that are a part of those institutions. And they're not just in religion, they're everywhere. And I call them vampires, because that's what they are. They take your energy, they take that spark of individuality and life force and just wonder and curiosity, and they take all of that kind of infantile energy and they funnel it into their bodies, and then they experience that, and they get to be the medium for that innate human quality, which is wonder or curiosity, and also, yeah, and also criticism. I'm not saying that priests are pedophiles, but that is a big reason why the Catholic Church is having such a big problem with pedophilia, is because these priests are already kind of predisposed to wanting to control people and wanting to control their experience, and also be this funnel and this medium for that kind of like I said, infantile or innocent energy.
It's kind of like they want to take ownership. You're talking about direct experience. They want to take ownership of that and say, I gave that to you, and sort of turn themselves into God. I'm the person that illuminated the truth of God to you, instead of trusting and actually having true faith in your direct experience. Because if you actually believe it's an omnipotent, all-knowing force, then shouldn't you kind of trust what each individual soul goes through?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of like forcing them onto this one track that you are controlling.
Yeah, and I bring up pedophilia, and I don't mean to say that religion or that it's a pedophilic institution or something. I'm just saying that that's why it's a big problem, is because they're already predisposed to being that kind of vampire. And that's what a pedophile is to begin with. It's a vampire. It's taking a child who is just bursting with that innocent, creative, that very young energy. And what these people do, who are vampires, and a pedophile is one manifestation of that, is they take that energy, and through an exchange they take it from them, and this makes them more powerful, or at least feel that way. And it goes to show how we can set these situations up and not really be aware of it. And that what trying to control people's experience of reality, where that gets you, is that gets you to people being vampires, and that gets you to greed, and that gets you to jealousy, and all of these things. When a group of people controls a consensus reality, then what happens is we get the ego being in charge, and we get basically we get people's nature coming into play, and how they want us to perceive reality. It's only natural at the same time. I don't want to say pedophilia is natural, but it's a symptom of it. So what naturally happens is, when people get in that power position and they control the consensus reality, which is what the church did for a long time, they get into that power position and it feeds them. That's why the Pope lives so long, at least the popes before him, and the popes, during the reign of the church, the real reign. That's why they live so long. That's why they were, because they fed off of this life force energy that dwindled away in them because they weren't connected to it. They had a skewed view of reality, and they didn't have access to it. So they didn't think that they had access to it, because they certainly did, because they're humans, but they got to a point where they literally were like, okay, well, now we need to do something about it. So how about we get some little boys, and their young energy will fuel me for a few more years. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the specifics of that, but that's certainly how it goes. And that's how it always has gone. And it's absolutely horrible. But that is a more extreme variation, or a more extreme manifestation of the vampire energy, the controlling. Now, I'm not talking about facilitating or guiding. I'm talking about controlling, like constricting, like a boa constrictor, like chokes you. I'm talking about that. And when we get down to it, there are many, many, many vampire institutions. And I have a video about it as well, where I kind of go into it. But there are many of them that exist. One of them being an organized religion. Now, as well, there are some that are not, and that's okay. Some people, and I can't speak for all of them. Again, this is a generalization, not a universal universal assumption. But organized religion, it's a big problem in that. Definitely in the food and drug world, it's a big one, especially in the drug world. There's a lot of vampires in that place. In the food world, there are people who make the food crap, make the food junk, just to please that part of your brain that likes sweet stuff, and that part of your body that craves sugar for energy. They basically off of that, they kind of go off that, and they create all of these foodstuffs that aren't real, kind of like junk food. They taste pretty good, but those people are vampires because they create a product that basically makes you sick. That's why it's called junk food. And they still sell a lot of it. They literally call it junk food. Like, they're professional vampires. They're like, yeah, this food makes you sick, but it tastes good. You should definitely eat it, and as well soda companies. Like, I'll have a root beer every once in a while, but there's some people who are almost dependent on sodas. I mean, I've known people that have, drink packs and packs a day. That is another company as well. And they also sell to children, which is a big one, because children have a lot of energy, and children have a lot of energy to give them. And we give them, and we give corporations and institutions these energies through exchanges. And one of them is money, because money is a medium for energy. It's all the stuff that you've been doing for that week. You put into that money. You put into that transaction. And when a kid goes to pay for something with his own money, he's putting all his energy into it. And what these companies do is they take this money and they give this child a crappy product that's going to basically screw up their metabolism for a day. And then they take that money and they go, he, this is mine. And then they're basically not stealing, because there's a transaction involved, but they're kind of taking this child's energy, taking this child's health. And they're also taking people's health. There are plenty of ways you can make soda healthy, not have 60 grams of sugar in them. And Coca-Cola now has Coca-Cola Life, which is the stupidest shit I've ever seen. It's, instead of 60 grams of sugar, it's 40 grams of sugar with some stevia, I think, like a little bit. That's still 40 grams of sugar. That's like, how much is in a sweet potato if there was no potato and it was just sugar? Like, it's ridiculous. It's not how anything comes into your body in the environment. Anyways, we could go into how stupidly unhealthy it is. But calling it life, they have an agenda. They want you to think that this product is going to make you feel lively, that this product is going to make you burst from the seams with liveliness, with that youth. They try in every commercial. They have kids or they have people, and they're acting all youthful and stylish and cool. And it's the same agenda that the cigarette companies had before. People were like, actually, you're fucking evil. You can't do that anymore. You can't have commercials. You can't have commercials with kids in them. You can't have commercials with all these other things. Soon, and it's in the process, we're going to be taking down those commercials with kids in them, because it's really messed up. And people are getting on to that these people are vampires. And they try and stylize these things, because that's how they control how people experience their product. And once we figure out, once we make the connection that there are vampire people and vampire associations in this world that want to control your experience of reality, specifically the people on the television who create circumstances and create all these different things. Like, I'm not talking about TV shows or anything, because I love some TV shows. Very cool. Like Game of Thrones, things like that. But I'm talking about commercials. When commercials come on and they're trying to convince you to buy things. Now, most of them are useless, to be honest. And the thing about Coca-Cola commercials, anything trying to sell you a product, you can tell when they're a complete vampire, when they completely exaggerate everything that they're doing. They're not like, this is a great product, and here's why. Here's a list of things. It's just great for your health. It's great for all this stuff. No, they go into it and they're like, there's a beach. It's for beer usually. And then there's a tiny little warning at the end, but it's for beer, and it's like at a beach, and there's like some attractive women in bikinis and like a party going on. And they're like, if you drink Dos Equis, you'll have just as much fun as I am right now. And it's creating associations in your brain. So this is also how they control your experience. From now on, when you see Dos Equis, there's a part of your brain that's going, that means a good time. So what they're doing is they're selectively programming people to experience reality a certain way, and they're fucking evil. And each one has its own agenda. Now, if they had like a stalk of kale and everyone was having a fun time, or they had like, some kind of healthy food, they're like, hey, look, we eat this food and we feel great. Like, this is how our life goes. Now that we eat this, look at all the weight I've lost. Look at all these things I've done. They're creating a lifestyle for you. And they're selectively, from people who watch TV more than others, they're selectively programming people to live a certain lifestyle. And sorry, my dog's jumping on me again. He's crazy. But they're selectively programming people to perceive reality a certain way. And that's what, and television is even called programming. They just make it so obvious for us to figure out their stupid bullshit. That
it's the Matrix.
I mean, yes, and in a particular sense, yes, there are lots of institutions in place that are trying to control the consensus reality. When you figure out who these institutions are and you start to see them a certain way, or you start to perceive reality a certain way, then you can start noticing them, because every day I notice it. I notice it almost everywhere, and it's not a paranoia. It's a part of nature. It's a part of attraction. It's a part of all these things. The only difference is that these companies use it to steal energy from you, to steal your worth, to steal your life force, to steal that youthful, creative part of you that is dependent on your health and dependent on how you perceive reality, which has a big part to do with how you eat, first of all, because how you eat builds all the stuff that makes up how you think and how you feel and what you do. And each one of them comes with a different way. And there's no one way to eat, to be honest. And anyone who says that there's one way to eat doesn't understand genetics at all. And that goes for veganism and all of them, the raw diets, all, everything. They don't understand genetics that well. Everyone's unique to their own genetic predispositions and their own genetic diet, to be honest. Because if your ancestors have eaten for 3,000 years wheat, whole wheat, real wheat, not the hybridized wheat that we get, it would be unintelligent to then make that person stop eating the whole wheat. Because then their body's like, we've been eating this for like 1,000 years almost. If you're like you're like very close related to Europeans, and you take them and put them on a paleo diet, they're probably going to be like, what in the hell are you doing? Like, what are you doing with me? I know how to process wheat. Maybe not as good as an Asian person, but yeah, I know how to process it. I know how to deal with it. I know how to make food. I know how to make energy out of it. You know, and it goes into all areas of health. That there are these. If you can begin to notice them and begin to understand the framework in which these people steal energy from you and steal life force from you. And, some people call that chi, whatever you want to call it. But they steal your health. They steal your perception of reality, which then it becomes this loop where you're experiencing something that really you were programmed to experience. And then you do things because you're programmed to do them. And you're not aware of it. And I think everyone goes through this in one way or another, if they're exposed to technology or not. There are certain people, and this goes, I guess, into conspiracy theories, that there are vampire institutions. I know that this might sound crazy, but it's not. It goes into some conspiracy theories, like there's an actual collective agenda behind these vampire corporations and their plans for everything. And, like the Illuminati and, the Freemasons and, all of these things. And, they could probably all be real. I think it's all exists. I think there's certain merit for each one of the ideas, but there's certainly one thing for sure, is that if you go and watch a beer commercial, you will know they're trying to control what you think about beer, using just basic psychology, using basic psychology stuff that was found out 60, 70 years ago about the human mind and how people operate. And if you can start noticing these things and becoming open to them and actually start to think about it and not let other people control your perception of it, then you can work towards transcending it. You can work towards moving around it, watching a beer commercial and laughing at it, being like, haha, that's so funny. Like, I don't think about beer that way. And usually people don't, unless they actually are in Puerto Rico or in the Bahamas, but that's what every commercial is. It's some ridiculous opening of the beer as well. Like, the opening is like an orgasm and it like flies everywhere. And it's like the most enticing looking thing ever. It's the same with junk food places, like fast food. They use the same psychology method. They go, look at this burger. It's the greatest looking burger of all time. And this is the burger you'll get if you come here. And you go there and it's like half the burger of what you expected. Yeah, because they gyp you. They're vampires. They and then you're already there, so you're like, I might as well get something. I'm not going to go somewhere else. And then it ropes you into a loop. So it ropes you into doing things, experiencing things that they want you to. And if there are enough of these little nodes that they implant in your brain, if there are enough of these, they can control your actions. That's a big one. And then you have little room to experience your own reality and your own perception of reality and just your own stuff and your own roadshow and your own self. You have very little time to experience that because other people are putting little implants, little thought implants into you, and they're just shooting them at you. We need to critical thinking is a big part of protecting yourself from stupid stuff that people say, especially on the television. Critical thinking is wonderful. And to be honest, it's probably one of the most important things that can protect you from this kind of bullshit. And basically, it's like, haha, I see you there. That's interesting. I'm not going to accept it into my brain. I'm going to let it float around. I'm not going to let it penetrate. You see what I mean? I'm not going to let it take hold and make a little house and make a little place to hang all my hang all its stuff. You know, I'm not gonna let it control my reality. And once you start doing that, and once you start saying, I'm not going to let any information control my reality and control what I think of reality and control my experience of reality, then you get to a point where you can start to build on that, and you can start to create what could be called the best version of yourself. But that's another part about it, is that there are very much vampire organizations, institutions, people that are going to try and steal your energy while you're doing this. Because when you become that, and you embody that kind of alpha mentality, or that kind of alpha state, there are going to be people who don't know how to get there and don't know how to do things, and they become jealous, and their ego comes into play, and they're like, I want some of that, and you know, I want it, and they're going to use those same techniques to try and get it from you, because they want to feel it. They want to control how much you get of it. See, that's another one. And that plays into as well the whole system of drugs that we have as well. That they don't want you. A big part of it is the government, in a sense, different parts of the government work together to make sure that you don't experience some states of consciousness, because they deem it not okay. And it's a direct violation of what it means, in my opinion, to be human, is having cognitive liberty, is having, in a sense, that control over your life to put what you want in your brain and in your body. And a big part of what I talk about is that the government is parts of it are, not all of it, because there's a lot of good parts, is not all of it's bad, but there's definitely parts of it that are vampires, that are vampiric. And that is one of them. That essentially the war on drugs waged, long time ago, back in the Nixon era, that was a direct result of them not liking the experiences that people were having on particular drugs, because most of them were used medically before they were outlawed and basically taken out of the medical industry and taken out of the communities, taken out of everywhere, or at least they tried to. They actually made it worse, but they were basically saying no, especially in response to LSD, even though it helped us discover the neurotransmitter serotonin. LSD fueled so much perspective change and so much change within the culture that they literally, the vampires, which is who they were, they came and were like, y'all can't be doing this anymore. It's the same thing that happened with the Catholic Church, with the witch trials. It's on the same level as that, because they came in and they were like, we don't want you experiencing a different perception of reality than us. We have our little reality right here, and we like it, and we don't want you to be doing this. So basically, we're going to throw you all in jail, or throw you all in prison, scare the crap out of you so you don't try and do it again, and basically treated us like children. But that was a big one. They basically molested people just so they wouldn't experience a particular kind of particular state of consciousness. And what troubles me about it as well is that this should be a pillar of adulthood, a pillar of a society, is that we don't control what states of consciousness people access. That should be a pillar of American values, is we don't control what the people put in their bodies, and ultimately how it changes their state of consciousness, but ultimately how they think. So if you can control the drugs, and you can control how people use their brains or abuse them, you control or expand them. That's another one. You control how people think. And if we look at the drugs in this culture, they're coffee, tobacco. I'm talking big ones like cash crops. Coffee, tobacco, sugar, because sugar does have a neurological effect on the brain. That's why you get the sugar high. And we have, so I said tobacco, coffee, sugar. Another one is alcohol. So all of those things are, so the first ones are stimulants. Okay. They keep you stimulated. So that state of consciousness is great for industry. It's wonderful for industry because you're stimulated long enough to do mundane, stupid shit that you don't want to do. Like sit in a cubicle for 12 hours. No one wants to do that with literally synthetic lighting and white-walled rooms like for 12 hours. Like that's not okay for human beings, but stimulants get you through it. You need to go through the grind. You need to work and work and work until you die. And then alcohol keeps you depressed long enough for you to not do anything about your situation, but also so that you don't perceive reality differently, so that you don't perceive it with new eyes, so that you perceive it with an aching heart. And then that goes into how they have just controlled the population. They figured out a way through drugs, through allowing certain drugs, only if they align with the cultural narrative, which is capitalism and industry. Now, I'm not saying either of those two things are horrible. What I'm saying is that them implementing this kind of agenda, because it is an agenda, because only until recently has cannabis become an actual cash crop, even though it was a cash crop before it was legalized. And we know those are for stupid reasons beyond belief. So only till recently have these things come up. But the thing about it is that that's only because people fought for it. That's only because people fought for it and said, you know what, it should be like this for all of them, but we're going to work on this one because we're adults, and we're not going to have a society that is full of alphas, that is full of well-rounded individuals, that's full of people chasing their dreams, until we get over this stupid, childish, vampiric institution of controlling what people put in their bodies. It's insane, and it doesn't work. First of all, the prohibition never worked, and in fact, it made it worse. And then the prohibition of everything else also made it worse. And prohibition makes everything worse, basically. Creates a criminal syndicate, creates an underground system, an underground market, which then other vampires and other opportunists then use as a platform to make money. And then there's no regulation, not regulation, but there's no accountability to anyone. If someone gives you a bad product, basically, you're shit out of luck. Who are you going to tell? The police? Like that, we can't sue them. We can't do anything like that. So it creates a destabilization. So basically, the reason why these vampiric entities, these people, want to control what we put in our bodies and ultimately how we change our state of consciousness is because they want to control the consensus consciousness. It's pretty simple. So if you can control what drugs people do, you can control almost everything about them. I mean, it seems if they were to prohibit coffee, there would be an outrage. People would be, what are you doing? Oh my God. Even though it's the most abused substance, one of them in America, other than alcohol, tobacco. Tobacco's going down a little bit because people are, realizing that chronic anything isn't healthy for you. But I think people should still be able to smoke and drink and do all that stuff. Of course, if you're an adult. And we can get into what that means later as well. But what was I saying? So, yes. So if you control the consensus consciousness and you control what drugs people use, you can then demonize them, demonize the ones that aren't, and demonize the people that do them. So you actually create a separation in the culture. And this is fundamental, like higher dimensional psychology. So it's almost like sociology, but more psychological. So basically, they can create a culture within the culture that is criminal automatically, and that is disgusting and despised. You should be despised because they do a drug. You know, it makes them aliens. It makes them demons. The word is demonize for that reason. And a big thing that happens when a culture is evolved is that the culture then puts forth the drugs and the substances, the food that it deifies. So it deifies certain substances, certain food, certain drugs, certain this, certain that, certain tools. And then it demonizes the ones that don't agree with its paradigm, with its narrative, with its structure. And what happens is, what you get is a separation in the culture. And then automatically, what's so horrible about it is that the only way we've made progress with alcohol, with coffee, with cigarettes, with any of these things that are highly abused is that they were allowed in the society. So then we can make progress with them. See, if they're not in the society, no progress can be made, or very little, because it's not accepted. So the moment that we literally either legalize or in some way accept into our society these other substances and deify everything and say, we're accepting of people doing things that we don't necessarily agree with their brains. And once that happens, then you'll get respect and you'll get programs that come up, which is what is happening in Portugal. You'll have people who are heroin addicts that aren't afraid to go get help, that aren't, that people who are hopelessly dependent on cocaine can go get help, and they don't feel ashamed about it. It's if we treat it as though it's a natural part of our human nature, because it is, to experience other states of consciousness. Yeah, some drugs are like real horrible and it'd be better for you never to take them, but if you demonize them and you don't let anyone have them, it creates a naughty effect. This is what I call the naughty effect. So whenever your mom or whenever an authoritative figure tells you not to do something, you usually want to do it, right? Now, if you went and reversed, maybe this wouldn't work for everyone, but if you went and reversed that logic and you said, you know what? Yeah, this drug exists, and yeah, you can take it, but here's what it does to you. And that authoritative figure says, here it is. If you still want it, this is what it'll do. It'll enslave you to it. It'll, and obviously just put forth, not propaganda, but put forth the evidence. I mean, heroin is essentially a chemical enslavement. So you tell them, you say, okay, so yeah, you can have it, but this is what it does. Do you still want it? Because we have all these drugs over here that are a lot less toxic, like coffee or any of these things. We have other kinds of substances that are better alternatives. And if you want to try this, we would suggest using these and not that, but you can still have that. And when you create that kind of environment, now I'm not saying this is going to happen or would happen or should happen, but that's the ideal environment where adults can make decisions for themselves and adults can navigate this society and navigate this reality without being demonized. If I want to smoke pot, or if I want to drink coffee, or if I want to do any drug, I should not be demonized unless I take the drug and then go kill some children. Like, unless I hurt someone or I severely hurt myself, it should be the concern of no one else except my significant people around me. Whenever you don't demonize it, you create more of a connection in the community. You create people, instead of being like, ew, you're a heroin addict, they're like, oh man, like, that sucks. Like, being, yeah, like heroin addicts are seen as gross. Like, ooh, gross. They're like the scum of the world. I mean, how would that, I can't even imagine. I mean, it's probably worse than bullying to have someone basically demonize you out of society, out of the acceptable part of the norm, in a sense. So a big part of this kind of, maybe not scheme, but definitely agenda that I'm talking about, is there are specific people, specific organizations, institutions, blah, 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 whatever you want to say, entities that want to control what you think and want to control what you do with yourself and what you do with other people. And they have their roots in organized religion, because that's the original control mechanism for society. They probably take from those techniques, and they really hold in their books and in their things like that. They hold the techniques for controlling the consensus consciousness, and that's what secret societies are all about. That's what Freemasonry is about. It's what the Illuminati is about. It's what they're all about, whether they exist or not in any substantial way. Is they're about controlling everything from the reason I respect Freemasons is because they're secretive. At least they talk about stuff in private. The people who want to control you, that you should really worry about, are the people who do it in plain sight, that basically would molest you and you wouldn't even know it. And and I'm not talking about sexual molesting, because obviously you'd notice, but like just molesting your psyche and you not even know it. You would just brush it off and be like, what was that? Like commercials, like all sorts of things, like propaganda about drugs, like those stupid commercials that were like, this is your brain on pot. Like, remember those when they would fry an egg? Like, they're stupid. There's no other way to put it. They're dumb. It's like, this is your brain on pot. No, actually, it's not your brain on pot. There's a lot of information on it. Maybe you should look into it. I'll certainly consider what you say, but it still sounds stupid to me because of all this other information that actually reputable people have. And then when you get to a point where you critically think about things, and when you use logic to think about them, you realize that there are people that don't want you to think for yourself. And that's what it comes down to, is they don't want you to experience for yourself, because that's unknown to them. That's the void, the darkness that they're not really sure about. So they're afraid of it. They don't want you to experience things for yourself. They don't want you to smoke pot. They don't want you to do LSD or do mushrooms or do any of these any drugs, because they're afraid of what you might experience. They're afraid of what you might come out of it as, that wouldn't align with their plans for you. And I keep saying "there" as a general term, but I'm talking about these vampire institutions whenever I say that. I say they or their. I'm just trying not to have to say them every single time, all of them at once. It's just there. They are. But it gets to a point where we have to stand up for ourselves, and we have to realize that this is the truth of it. Is that it's pretty plain and simple that there are people, and maybe it's those motivational people, who knows, but there are people who want to empower you, want you to experience your own version of reality. And then there are people, this is my husky boy right here. And then there are people who want you to experience their reality and only theirs, and none others. We don't want you to go over there. Even though a lot of these drugs that are legal have actually been deeply connected to cultures all over the world. Like, for instance, the San Pedro ceremony that Catholics took part in and integrated. The original ceremony was in Chavin, which was Chavin de Juntar, which is a place near a place in South America, I believe near Peru, in between Bolivia. Anyways, they had, basically it was a council of shamans, and basically they would give people the San Pedro, and everyone would have their own experience, and the shamans are there to guide you. So they're there to just facilitate things. They're there to kind of help you along. They're not there to say, okay, so right now you're going to do a hymn and we're going to sing, and you're going to think this. So this is what God's telling you right now. This is what your experience is. This is what you're going to do. And now everyone stands up, and now everyone sits down, and now we all say a prayer. It wasn't like that. It was everyone did this, had their own experience of that divine place, which is experiencing altered states of consciousness, experiencing different, more expansive states of consciousness beyond sobriety, which is what a religious experience is. It's something mystical, it's something mysterious, it's something spiritual. And they were giving it to these people, and basically the shamans were, until the Spanish came in. And they were like, yeah, this isn't cool. We want to control what these people are thinking. We don't want them to experience it for themselves. We want to do this. Like, we want to be in control. We want to be operating, because there's something called a mesa in the experience, and it's an altar table, and it has a bunch of different skulls on it, and all sorts of artwork, and all sorts of little tools and things. And it's for everyone. So you put something there, and then you take something whenever you leave. And it's an exchange table for new information and new energies to take hold. So you can put rocks there, crystals, or anything you want. Anyways, the Spanish took it and then made it into an altar where they were the centerpiece. It wasn't you being the center of the universe and the center of all experience and creation. It was them being the center of the universe. And they took that from everyone on that day, and they said, nope, this isn't yours anymore. This isn't your right as a human being, even though it should be, even though it's a fundamental part of our human nature to experience these altered states of consciousness. We're going to take them from you and keep it for ourselves so we can control it, and then disseminate whatever information we want to you about the divine and about God and about everything to believe in the world. So they took it, made their own religion, the San Pedro facilitated religion, and they just watered down the brew, so you would just have a little more tingly sensations, and you wouldn't get the full-blown visions, so that they could control it and they could maneuver it. And they're originally called maestros, or masters. They became a master in a vampire way. They became a master in that they controlled it. You know, that in that particular practice of making San Pedro is illegal. And maybe not for like a specific church or something like that, but these shamans at Chavin weren't even from the same place. So they weren't a part of a culture. They were a bunch of different shamans who came out of the jungle and were like set up shop, and they were like, all right, let's, and they would help everyone. So they would bring pilgrims in, they would bring all sorts of people, and you would make a pilgrimage down to this temple and partake in these ceremonies and get your own experience out of them. This is one of the instances where we take a culture that has existed for I think 2,000 years. I can't remember, more than 1,000, but it was years where there was no war, there was no conflict in this culture, there was no military at all, and it was because they had this direct experience they had a right, they had a facilitated right to experience whatever they wanted. And this is one institution. So, and people call them magic mushrooms or whatever. They need to be educated. They've been around for more than 10,000 years in culture. And a lot of them are. Peyote, iboga is another one. Ayahuasca. And these are all ceremonial practices that have kind of been molested by modern religion. It's really a molestation, because we take this position of arrogance and wanting to control every experience everyone has, or at least try to get as many people in that spider's web as we can, so that we can suck all the life out of them like a spider and wrap them up in this little cocoon of fucking of just control, in a sense. You can't move inside that cocoon. We do that, try and get as many people as we can from this arrogant position. We say, oh, you know what? These mushrooms that have existed for more than 10,000 years, maybe even up to 40,000 years and beyond in culture, in Africa, in all sorts of places around the world. You know what? No one should have access to them, even though they've had a valuable impact on culture for more than 40,000 years. But us, being the all-knowing ancestors, descendants of Greeks and democracy and all of that, we think that we can just arrogantly put all that off to the side. And it's pretty ridiculous that we don't integrate these other practices into our culture. Because if they've had value for thousands, if ayahuasca has been valued for thousands of years in Peruvian and South American cultures for thousands of years, don't you think there's some worth to it? I mean, that's insane that it is a pillar. It's called the master medicine in Peru, the grandmother medicine. And then peyote or San Pedro, which was called Wachuma in the old days, is called the grandmother medicine. And we take these two things and we say, no, we're going to demonize you because we don't really understand you and we can't control you, really. We can't control you, and we can't control the people who take them. So no one can have them. And, this is essentially what Big Brother says. What they're saying. Another thing, the vampires. People who are really looking out for a person's well-being are not going to control them in that way. They're going to guide them, which is what education is really about. What real growth is really about. And I'm not saying, and even some practices, like meditation, like yoga, all of these different things. There are tons of different practices that we've integrated because you can control that. There's a limited space for what you can do with your body in yoga. We certainly wouldn't allow the original yoga, which was tantra, which was people having sex. That's definitely not allowed because we can't control people when they do that. We can control people if they're doing a sunrise salutation or something, like an ansansa or something like that. But we can't. We couldn't have the original yoga happen because that would be terrible and horrible. I'm not saying that there should be tantra studios opening up, but if you see what I mean, there are practices that our culture loves to take, but then there are also practices that our culture that are valuable to those other cultures, they're very valuable, that they demonize because they don't know what to do with them. They being these vampire people. They're like, I don't know about that. I can't really control people's perception of it. And then you get to a point where there's a destabilization, like what happened in the 60s with LSD. People were like, yeah, because that's a fundamental part of what these particular drugs do, is they actually, okay, just one second. Sorry. What are you eating? Sorry, my dog was eating something. What are you eating? Okay. Anyways, so what these practices like yoga, like meditation, like ayahuasca, like peyote, like wachuma, like iboga, like all of these things, basically what happens when you meditate or do any of these practices is there's a default mode network in your brain. And this default mode network is facilitated by a certain area of your brain. I would probably butcher the name of it, but anyways, it's called your default mode network, or what could be called the ego of your body and your nervous system, the master, the control center that helps you filter and facilitate all this information that's coming everywhere. So your default mode network, which is incredibly useful for surviving and for being alpha. I mean, you have to be aware of your surroundings. And that's a big part of what the default mode network is in your brain. Now, what these certain practices do is they turn that off so that different parts of your brain can communicate to each other. And in this space, what happens is that you see the world in a different way. You perceive situations differently. You perceive everything differently after that. Whenever your default mode network is turned off. The default mode network would include all of those things that I talked about earlier, like patterns in your brain, like all of these different things. It's almost like if there was a bunch of chalk on a chalkboard and you just went up and erased all of it, and you could start again and create new things, create new perceptions, create new realities for yourself. A big part of that is that they can't control that. What they can control is, sorry, my phone fell down. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. What they can control, however, is that very thing, the default mode network. So they can work with that because it's predictable. It's perceivable. But when someone has an experience outside of the cultural default mode network, which is what culture is, it's that ego on a higher dimension. It's that mind component of the default mode network on a higher dimension. So what you get is you get what government is essentially ego. It is the default mode network of the higher dimensional entity, which is the human race. And there are many different default mode networks, but whenever you step outside the default mode network, and whenever you turn that off, you get to a very peculiar place that's very familiar to most people, that you could say if you were to meditate for an hour or for 30 minutes, you definitely feel different afterwards. And that's because you've broken free of this default mode network, of this essentially control system in your brain. And this is very threatening to an entity, a higher dimensional, a greater entity, a greater default mode network that sees this, that's like, I don't like you doing that because I don't know what's happening over there. I don't know what's going on. And there's a lot of friction that comes up. And whenever you meditate or whenever you do any of these experiences, there's a lot of friction between your default mode network. And it's almost the same friction as there is in culture, to be honest. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you sitting there? Why are you meditating? Why are you, why you could be doing something productive? You're kind of wasting your time. What are you doing? It's the same, this could be dangerous, in response to other practices. This could be dangerous. This is horrible. Oh my God. The same response that you get from culture, which is the higher dimensional default mode network. And when you really get into how impactfully, or how immensely impactful just doing those particular things are, and why they've had such a ginormous impact on cultures in the past, just meditation, for instance, you can tell that they're incredibly important. And the people of the 60s knew that as well. I know LSD is a new compound, derived from LSA. But they knew what was going on at the time. They knew, oh, we're very threatening to the default mode network, the big brother, the father commander, that wants to control our experience. We're having these crazy, psychedelic experiences. That's not okay for them. That's not okay for the government. The government doesn't want you experiencing anything else except the social narrative, which kind of trickles down into your own default mode network, which is how you perceive reality. So if we can pull back from this, which is going to be hard, this is one of the very foundational techniques of not a sorcerer, but a vampire. A vampire is someone who wants to control your experience, and feed off of it. Now, an empowerer, or what would be called in any of these other religions, other practices like ayahuasca, or peyote, or any of these other ones, they're shamans or healers. They're really just facilitators. They're guides. And there's a big difference between a healer, or a wizard, or sorcerer, or someone like that, or an empowerer. There's a big difference between them in every level of the society and government and business and all of that. There's a giant difference between them and an empowerer. So there's a vampire, or there's an empowerer. There's an alpha. So it's hard to categorize what a vampire would be in the scale of wavelengths, but there's an alpha, and then there's freaking vampires. And that's a big part of it I want to get across, is that if a big way to get out of the way of these default mode networks is doing something like meditation. If you want to see your patterns in real time, and your behaviors and all of these things, go meditate, or do a float tank session, like an isolation tank. I know we've experienced that one before. I mean, it's different than anything else. It's basically not being at the mercy of all of these patterns that you've created for yourself. And it's a really incredible place. Like if you go and do an isolation tank for, an hour and 30 minutes or something, and you're floating in the water, and it's completely pitch dark, and it's completely quiet. There's no other stressors going on in the environment. And you turn off that default mode network like that. It happens very, very fast. And you realize that beyond the veil of this filtering, kind of overarching control mechanism, there's an entire universe of potential, and an entire universe of energies that can be tapped into, and that can be embraced or embodied. There's an entire universe right in front of your eyes that you can't see because of this default mode network. because your brain has been developed over millions of years to compute our reality and to make it comprehensible so that we can survive in the wild. We're developing new techniques for getting around this because we no longer live in this environment called the wild, at least not most of us in the civilized world. So our brains were developed to fight, basically fight cheetahs and find food, and look in the tree line, tiger, without even concentrating on it. We have very good peripherals. We have all of the precursors for having a very good brain for survival. Maybe not finely tuned, but that can be changed. We have a very good brain for survival, but we don't have a good brain for solving problems. At least not while we're stuck in the default mode network or stuck in our patterns of behavior, or rhythms. You could call them that too. That's a big one as well, is that our brains over millions of years have developed to basically assess where food is and make sure there are no tigers on the horizon. And we didn't have, we as in humans back in the days when we lived in the wild didn't have the luxury of sitting around until we started finding better food that would satiate us for a long time. So we wouldn't have any periods of time where the default mode network wasn't necessary, because even when you were sleeping, that thing needed to be ready at a moment's notice if a tiger came into the village or something like that. So we've had this incredibly active default mode network for the better part of 2,000 years. And what happens is, and what this confluence is happening in culture and happening in this space, and where we discover the alpha human or the alpha reality, is being able to control that part of our brain, or at least facilitate it to do what we want it to do. So being in a position where in a certain situation you can turn that on or you can turn it off in a certain situation. And the integration of all these techniques would definitely help us. But meditation is a good example, or breathing. That's another one. But so basically what happens is that we come to the modern era and we are not functioning in the wild anymore. There are still threats, of course, out and about, driving your car, doing all these things, but they're few and far between. And when we're in the car, we're doing, out running errands and stuff, yeah, our default mode network is really active. But once we get home and there are no threats, it doesn't turn off. It doesn't turn off when we need to love someone. It doesn't turn off when we need to do things that are creative. It's still there, and it kind of haunts us, and we call it the ego, but it's really a survival mechanism that was implemented probably more than 10,000 years ago. When we stepped out of a kind of Eden or a paradise, and we no longer had access to a lot of food. We had to go find food. We had to hunt. We had to do all of these things. So it changed us almost permanently. But we're now to the point where we don't need it as much anymore, or we need it to be in service of us, because at that point in time, we needed to be in service of it, because it, or in a sense, this default mode network, was keeping us alive. Like, if we didn't have it, humans wouldn't be here. If we were like the dodo birds and stupid, we would not be here. Like if they didn't have a good default mode network, they were just running around, not doing much. But the thing about the default mode network is that it's completely necessary for about half of life, and then completely unnecessary for about another half of life. Half of your life is in like a day. And this also kind of trickles down into your nervous system. So your nervous system is parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic is directly related to the ego, or the default mode network. It's the flight or flight response. The parasympathetic is directly related to that area outside of the default mode network, which is that resting and that reconnection and that regeneration. Regeneration is a key word in that. And that's a good thing to say, because there are dimensions to this. So we have our nervous system on one level, mode network, and then the societal default mode network, which is government, which is intervention into our lives and different things like this, different areas of the government. Now, the default mode networks are useful to a certain extent, and then we don't need them for some things, or we need very little of it. And that's when it becomes a problem. And that's kind of what I experience as the main neurosis of the modern mind, or the modern world. If we were to pull out from that, the modern world itself, and that these control institutions are kind of like symptoms of this event, almost like a reverberation from when that survival mechanism came into play. And there are these people who we call vampires, or I guess you could call them reptilian, which are masters of the default mode network, which are masters of controlling people. A big thing to add there, because reptilian is exactly, some people call it the reptilian brain, our ego, or that default mode network. The reptilian brain, the predator brain, the super aware, super cold and harsh and collected and analytical brain that's super useful for hunting and gathering and doing all of those things, but not useful for loving and drawing and doing all of those things. And we have this kind of neurosis, or this imbalance in the two hemispheres of the brain, and also, in the two modes of the nervous system, and then also in the modes of society itself. And the higher dimensional default mode network, there's this great imbalance, and these institutions are kind of like higher dimensional forms of the brain, the default mode network. So you could see them as little nodes or neurotransmitters in the default mode network. And they operate much like this. So these institutions are like higher dimensional control centers. They're trying to mediate all the connections and all the pathways. They're like, no, you talk to this brain, you talk to that brain, you talk to that part of the brain, blah, 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 blah. Because that's what the default mode network does. It tells all the parts of the brain what areas to communicate to and what areas to ultimately experience. And that's what this higher dimensional default mode network does, is it actually it controls the input and also the output of existence, of reality, of all of these things. And there are many institutions, many people, many vampires like this, and they come in all shapes and sizes. But that's one of the parts, at least, that helped me get on the track to becoming an alpha. One of the parts to becoming an alpha is getting away from this default mode network, this kind of overarching control center of the brain that was not doing me any good in particular parts of my life, and still isn't. It still intrudes into everyday conversation and everyday thought. But yeah, I mean, it's really a struggle. That's kind of what our current situation is. It's a struggle to unite these two parts of the world, or unite these two parts of culture, which is something that's very interesting to me. Just a second, I got to pick up my phone. I've been talking for a while. Do you want to say something?
I agree.
What were you looking at?
Huh?
What were you looking at?
My desk?
Oh, okay. But do you have anything to say about that?
Um, Not really. Like I said, I don't know. I agree, I guess.
No. It's it's definitely something that should be taken into consideration. Sorry. But that is quite at least a big part for me. Um, and it's a foundational piece of my my beliefs, is that if you want to experience what it's like to get on the path to being an alpha, or kind of get started in a sense, probably go inward, or um, not so much try and create this alpha image of yourself, but go inwards and see how many of these patterns you have that are limiting you, and limiting your experience of reality, and also limiting your experience of self, of what you are, of what you perceive yourself to be, and really go into the mystery of what you are and how you are, because it is a big mystery. Uh, all all of these things are mysteries, and no one really knows the true answer of them all. And that's why I like to propose that people research them themselves, and research all of these ideas themselves. Don't take our word for it. Go out there and experience it yourself, and do it yourself. And sorry, I
Agreed.
need to take a glass of water real quick. Um, and I'm not, and I'm sure some people will misconstrue what I said, but I'm not a proponent uh, of drugs. I'm not saying that drugs. I think there are plenty of ways to achieve getting outside the default mode network without drugs. But one thing is that access point should be controlled. That's a big one, because I think that the default mode network culturally is also it's already so large that I don't think it should be overshadowing into what adults put in themselves and in their bodies, which then in turn potentiates new perceptions of reality. Because unless it's a religious institution, because if you're a crazy person and if you create an organized religion, they're fine with you. There's plenty of whack job people who create churches and like the spaghetti monster. But if a bunch of people started believing in the spaghetti monster and it wasn't organized, they would be very afraid of that. They being these institutions that want to control people, because that's scary to them. But if they organize, they can see where they are. They know their plan, their agenda, because it's expressed. They know that. If people are just experiencing this and not checking back in with the society about it, let's say if during the 60s, when everyone was experiencing that free love, peace movement, the only reason that was shut down was because it was free. uh, not free in terms of cost, but free in terms of free from control, free from people controlling. But if it was a church called Free Love and Peace, they'd probably have a different approach to it, because then they can look at their website, they can look at their stuff, their ads, their, reconnaissance work, and it's all out in the daylight. But when it's just free and it's free from control, then no one has the ability to go and keep tabs on it, because no one knows what's going on. And that's the biggest threat to them, because the abyss, the unknown, that kind of darkness, that dark area where we can't really control anything, they really hate that. But we love it completely. We love it. We are so enthralled by mysteries and mysticism and all sorts of things. That's why Harry Potter is such a popular movie, is because mystery and magic are so loved in the human soul. And that thing that's free from control and free from everything. That's why we think horses and nature are so beautiful, is because there's no real control mechanism for it. There's nature, which is kind of a control mechanism, but that's why people are like, when they watch horses run through a field, they're like, wow, it's just so beautiful. And it's because it's so free. It's so freeing. It's free from the chains of pattern and constriction of control. And that's why nature is so beautiful to people, and why it's not so beautiful to people in a zoo. Because because people don't like to see animals in a cage or in a little tank. Like, they like to see them free and in the wild. And these control centers don't like wild. These control institutions don't like things to be free or wild. And not free in terms of cost, again. Free in terms of just expression happening. They don't like that. They're okay with that being out in the ocean with animals, with different things like that. They're okay with that happening, but they're not okay with you experiencing any kind of real freedom with your mind or with your body or with almost anything that can be perceived. It's you can be free to buy what you want in the marketplace, but you can buy as many you can buy as many G6s as you want, or the new airplanes. You can buy that all you want, but you can't go outside the cultural operating system, which is something Terrence McKenna goes into. He says, your cultural operating system is it relates to that default mode network. Your brain itself has that operating system, which we run on, and that operating system can be reprogrammed. It can be rewired and recalibrated. And this operating system that culture is running on, he says, America 2.0 or something like that, something witty. And when we see that a cultural operating system is not working, or is not working, then there are ways we can change it, and it starts with the individual. So regardless of whether it's health or just everything, business, economy, it all starts with you. It starts with your operating system, and really how you interface with reality. And I mean, that's one of the most important parts, because your operating system can be reprogrammed, rewired, reassembled, everything. And then you have a blank canvas. once you rewire it, once you meditate for, an hour, something like that, go to a float tank session, one of the more extremes is going like, do ayahuasca in Peru or something like that. But you create a blank canvas, or you get to a place where there are no patterns of behavior that you are perceiving. There are no patterns that are overarching onto you, and you can create new ones in your psyche. You can create new patterns of behavior and new mechanisms for interfacing with reality within those experiences. And it's fundamental to the nature of being a human itself. And Terrence McKenna goes into the video. I remember it. It's so incredible. He talks about how shamans or healers or these kinds of people who have these practices like yoga and meditation and all that, they've always known this trick, this kind of hack or glitch in the matrix. In the matrix would be the cultural operating system. This hack in the matrix where you can step outside of the cultural operating system. You can step outside of the perceptions of others. You can step outside the patterns of behavior that you have. Okay. And you can experience a place where none of them are present with you. And however you get there, whether it be meditation or ayahuasca or iboga or whatever, drumming, there's ecstatic drumming as well that's been a practice forever. There's dancing. It's a big one. Dancing is a wonderful way to do it. All of these, all of these things we've always known, or at least it's been lost from knowledge because of these vampires, to be honest, that there is a cultural wiring that we can step out from, and we can get away from for a temporary amount of time, because culture is useful to a certain extent, and the operating system of your brain is very useful to a certain extent for survival and things like that. But we need the tools as human beings, as alpha human beings, to be able to step outside of the operating system whenever we so wish, and for whatever reason our heart desires, because it goes back as old as time. These techniques that accentuate the mystery, accentuate the true freedom of nature and reality, accentuate the wild, the wilderness part of our mind, where all creativity and innovation and all of these things springs from, this mysterious primordial energy. And the more we have access to this energy, the more we know ourselves, and the more we step outside of the cultural operating system, the more we potentiate the level of change that can happen inside of this culture and inside of this reality. And I think it's an integral part of being human, is that part of you that can step outside of the operating systems that are in place, and also be able to defend yourself or have access to techniques for spelling away these demons or these entities, these vampire entities that want to control your experience of reality, and feed off your energy. It's integral for us to have these techniques, because if we don't, just rhythm of time. We are slaves to the patterns and behaviors of the culture, and we are slaves to our own minds' patterns and behaviors and cultures and beliefs, which beliefs are a lower dimensional culture. culture is a higher dimensional belief, in a sense. Upheld, it's just consensus belief. But it's integral that we go to these places, because if we don't get to access that fundamental, essential component of what it means to be human at all. Because humanity is the epitome, the culmination of potentiation in the organic realm. From the moment we got our tools and stepped out onto the grasslands, we are the poster boy for stepping outside of the operating system, which is nature. We're the poster boy for stepping outside the operating system, stepping outside the default mode network. We are the focal point of change in reality. And basically, whenever you take away that thing, our techniques, and try to control them, our techniques of ecstasy, of mystery, of mysticism, of magic, of things that are outside of the operating system's ability to perceive them and conceive them and control them. When you take that away, what you're doing is actually damaging the psyche so much that we basically have to compensate for it. And when you get people that are so lost from tradition and so lost from techniques of these tricks of stepping outside the cultural framework, what you get is people that are very susceptible to these vampire corporations. And I'm not sure if they planned this out, but it certainly seems like they did, because it kind of all fits into place. Especially with respect to the church and how much they controlled everything at a certain time. It certainly seems like there's an overarching plan in place, in a sense, maybe unconscious, but that this is almost too perfect, that it fits in a little too well for me to be skeptical that it is somehow organized. That the kind of molestation of one of the most basic human rights wasn't planned and wasn't fully understood whenever we encountered its inception into our culture or other cultures alike. And it's a very, very disturbing fact indeed, that probably one of the most basic human rights of all, the ability to do with our minds and our bodies what we wish, is completely disrespected and violated and molested by these vampire individuals. Now, here's what you can do about them. here's what you can do about these vampires. You can empower yourself to be a more stronger-minded individual, I guess. That would be one of the things. You can empower yourself to think critically, to consider a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different sources, and consider information from all over the world, and consider information from many different kinds of people, because the vampire agenda depends on you not doing that. And that's why it's so important, because the vampire agenda, or the agenda of people who want you to be fixated on their reality, or their perception of what they want you to experience as reality. Fundamental part of that is that you have to not be thinking for yourself. That's probably one of the biggest parts of being an alpha, or being this thing that we are trying to portray. And I know it is a monster of a thing that we are getting across in this episode, but that life and reality in the universe is infinitely times more grand and great and magic and mystical and incredible than ever perceived or ever conceived. And that you are, in fact, the point at which experience or expression of every part of reality is mediated. You are the medium of experience of everything. So to take fundamental parts of that away from us, like our health and different things like that, our perceptions, our patterns, different things like these lock us into a place, which I've been to. I was once there, being fat, being depressed, being just just out of the just completely absorbed into the cultural operating system, so completely absorbed into what I guess you would perceive as that overarching entity. And it was interesting because I couldn't do art. Well, not that I couldn't do it, but I couldn't concentrate for very long. I couldn't do very many things like that. It was hard for me to do anything creative. I mean, I would have like bouts of creativity and stuff, but so I had been in a place like that where all these things lock you down and they keep you constricted, much like a boa constrictor. And what a boa constrictor does is it listens to your breath when it's around your neck, and it waits till you breathe the air out, and then it constricts you because it knows that you don't have any more oxygen. And this is another thing that these kind of these vampire organizations do, is they wait till you're empty, and then that's when they choke you to death. That's when they take the rest, and they're like, it's mine now. You can't get it back. Yeah, and I know I get elaborate with this, but this is a mix of metaphors and archetypes and different things that I'm saying. I don't want people to think that they're physically look like Dracula. Like I don't want people to have that archetype in their mind, because I mean, it is true to a certain extent. That's the nature of what they are. That's maybe they don't look like that. It would be easier for us to identify them if they did, but they don't. So we have to be more intelligent. I think it's better that way, that they don't look like absolute hideous creatures, because they look attractive to us. And that's the worst part about it. It's almost like a snake a little bit. It looks very tantalizing, very attracting, but really it sinks its teeth into you and injects venom into your bloodstream, or a bat. But what I was getting to about that was that it would be easier for us to combat them if they did look like vampires. And that is the best part, because we have to be smarter in order to, well, not defeat them, but just overcome them. We have to be smarter for that. And that's actually a wonderful part about it. It'd be a lot nicer if they actually look like vampires, but they're not. They don't. They look great. And that's probably the most dangerous part about them. And what gets the most people is that their attraction lures people in. It's very much like Dracula. There's that, if you look into his eyes or whatever, he trances you and you become entranced and you're like, whoa, it's so amazing. And that's what they use. They use hypnotic techniques to lure you and trance you in through commercials and different things like that. And what is what I don't want people to think is that I think they look like that. And I think they are literally like a Dracula movie. Now, they do express themselves like that a good bit, the nature of them, but they don't look like that. I'm not saying that they take off their skin at night and they're a Dracula vampire, or they take off their skin at night and they're like a 6-foot lizard. I'm saying the energy. I'm saying the nature is reptilian or vampiric. I'm not saying that they are literally a reptile when you take off their skin, or they shapeshift or something. Some people do believe in that. I'm not so sure about it, but
That's a little too far out for me.
I would have to see it with my own eyes, and then I'd be like, yep, that guy's a lizard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some ground, there's basis for how they act and how they interface with the world is definitely similar. As you know, reptiles are super intelligent, along with big predatory cats. They're one of the most intelligent of all the species, and the reason why they're so intelligent and so cold and harsh is because they have this super strong operating system, this super powerful default mode network. And reptiles are seen a lot of times as pretty cold-hearted. I mean, sometimes they are, but it's that kind of nature about them. They're very shiny. They're very attractive. They're very very hypnotic in a sense. But they will bite your head off if you get close to them. But yeah, yeah, not really sure what to say about the vampires anymore.
I'm thinking we should wrap this up.
Oh yeah, are you getting a little tired?
I am indeed. It's been, I think it's 3 hours, a little over 3 hours.
Dang.
That was a good. It's a good bit. A good.
All right. Well, dang, I didn't know it was that long. All right. Well, yeah. So expect a podcast from us here pretty soon, maybe in the next few weeks. We're probably going to start with not one every week, but one every couple weeks, or maybe one every month, or something like that. But
yeah,
we'll have one sometime soon, and we'll probably get like more specific and elaborate on things, because I can't go through the whole thing obviously in one episode. But I'll next time it's going to be Julian. We're kind of focusing on Julian next time, and
honestly, just to be real and raw with you, I don't know if I'm going to be able to fill 3 hours.
Oh, you don't have to fill 3 hours. It could be an hour long. This was just for me.
Maybe like 20 minutes. No, I'm just we'll see. We will see.
All right. Well, that was a great success, but hope everyone enjoyed it. But yeah, leave comments if you can. Criticisms are welcome of all types. Yeah.
Always.
Awesome. Well, peace, guys. We'll see you next time.